Good evening. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of D303 School Board on Monday, May 10th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Ms. Marzan, will you please call the roll to order?
Mrs. Bell,
Here.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Here.
Mr. Lackner,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe,
Here.
Mr. McNally,
Here.
Ms. Weibel,
Here.
Mrs. Barker.
Here. Okay, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Okay, we are going to switch an agenda item. Citizens' comments will follow the superintendent report. Is everyone okay with that? Great. Okay, Dr. Pearson, take it away.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Barker. I appreciate you giving me some time this evening to update you on some important events happening across the district. As we wrap up the school year, this is the last regular board meeting before the end of the year, and there's just a couple of activities that I wanted to bring to your attention. First of all, tonight, I'd like to just comment that we did receive some good word today from NIU and the DeKalb County Health Department. They are going to increase our capacity for our graduation event, which will allow us to have 60% capacity in the stadium, which will give us virtually 10 tickets per student. So we will be increasing that and getting that information out to families immediately so that additional family members could be invited. With that capacity, that really exceeds the number that we've typically had for any graduation ceremony in the past. So hopefully everyone who wants to attend can be accommodated, and friends and neighbors can share additional extra tickets if they have them with other people that may be looking for them. So we're looking forward to that. Just as a reminder, on the 24th, the North High School ceremony is at 4 o'clock and the East High School ceremony is at 7:30. I also wanted to highlight that we have a full offering of summer camps and programs this summer in the district. Everything from summer school to our athletic camps at the high schools to some of our specialized camps at middle school. So if you're interested in a summer camp experience for your child, we would encourage parents just to go to the website and look. You can see what's offered. You can also see it at each individual school site if there's something school specific that you're looking for. I also wanted to mention that we are currently on a tour to do staff recognition for our staff members across the district who are celebrating years of service awards. And so we have 20-year, 25-year, 30-year, and 35-year, just to give you an idea. This year we have 63 20 years of service award recipients. We have 21 25-year, 5 that are receiving the 30-year award, and 2 that are receiving the 35-year reward. Because of our capacity restrictions, we're actually doing the years of service awards at the schools. And so I've been going to the schools last week, this week, and next week to meet with the staff and to recognize those staff members that are receiving that recognition. I know several of you are joining me along the way, so I appreciate that. You're welcome to do so if you'd like to come and help hand out those awards. I just also wanted to mention then on the 26th of May at 5 o'clock, we have our retiree celebration, which will happen here at Thompson Middle School. It will be outside on the west side of the building. And so hopefully it will be a nice evening for that. And we'll be able to celebrate with our retirees their retirement. I also just wanted to mention that as we wrap up the school year, many of our programs that have needed to be virtual earlier in the year are actually able to offer in-person experiences, particularly the music programs at the high school. There are multiple music programs at East and North and at the in person that will be happening between now and the end of the school year, different ensembles. So if that's something that's interesting or of interest to you, please go to the website and you can see that information. I also wanted to mention that I talked with the district attorneys just to get some updated information on the mask mandate. So far, we are still under 7 Sullivan, Illinois Administrative Code 69050, which is set to expire on June the 2nd. It's our understanding that JCAR is looking to see if they plan to extend that, but for the remainder of the school year, we still are under the current guidelines related to the mask mandate. In Illinois, it is a part of the state code, so we're required to implement that for anyone over the age of 2 in our schools. We still don't have information yet about guidelines for the fall. I'll be speaking a little bit later in the meeting about our 2021-22 plans for the school year. But as far as PPE and that guidance is concerned, we're being told that we won't have additional information from IDPH until probably sometime in June. There are a couple of bills pending in the legislature about school metrics for health emergencies. And so they want to make sure that those are not passed, or if they are passed, they want to be able to implement them. So they're waiting until after the 31st of May before they move forward with any additional guidance from the state. I also wanted to mention that not this Saturday, but a week ago Saturday, the St. Charles Education Foundation held its annual fundraising event downtown. And they also presented the district with a check for $10,000 to help with wireless access points in the district. And so we accepted that, and that money will be going towards technology upgrades in the school district. So we continue to appreciate their partnership with the district and their desire to help us raise money for students and programs. And this event last weekend was another event that they held to try to continue to raise additional funds to provide to the school district. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce to you Dr. Tracy Taylor. Dr. Taylor is being recommended this evening as our new Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and she's actually here tonight, so I'm going to invite her to come to the microphone and just say a word of introduction. Dr. Taylor.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to take a moment to thank the board and Dr. Pearson for this wonderful opportunity. As a resident of District 303 myself, and as a mother of a future District 303 student, I am honored to have been selected as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I look forward to the work ahead, and I look forward to carrying out the goals of the district in this capacity. So again, thank you.
Welcome.
And that completes the report. Thank you, Ms. Barker.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson. Okay, that brings us to citizens' comments. Mrs. McCabe, would you please read our citizen comment policy?
The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Okay, our first speaker is Joe Bloomquist.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Joe Blomquist, a CEA president. I noticed today that they're on the list for discussion is around deep equity. I just wanted to re-emphasize my point that our teachers, our members are overwhelmingly in support of the equity work that we are beginning to engage in this district. It is really important that I stress that we can't, I urge you not to stop the learning that our staff can engage in around this topic. It is really important that we do that now. And as I mentioned before, we really want to make this a priority, not just one of many things that we explore over the next year or two, but something that we really immerse ourselves in as staff. So please consider that as you are discussing that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloomquist. Our next speaker is Rebecca Schwartz.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Pearson, union representatives, administration, D303 staff, and community members. My name is Rebecca Schwartz, and I am currently a third grade teacher at Munhall Elementary School. Over the past 5.5 years, including my student teaching, I have taught over 105 students in 3 different grade levels, ranging from kindergarten to 3rd grade. At the beginning of this school year, I received my tenure as well as my first lane change after receiving enough credits to move up. I grew up in this district, was a high school helper for 2 years at Munhall, was a leader for 5 years in the D303 summer school program, and was the program director for the afternoon summer camps after getting my teaching license. This district has given me a lot of opportunities since my kindergarten year as a student at Davis in 1999, and I have contributed a lot to this community. So why am I standing up here this evening? I once heard someone say, teaching is like a bad marriage. You never get your needs met, but you stay in it for the kids. And this could not be even more true today. Just like in a bad relationship, our communication is broken down. We are not being heard. As the school year went on, I thought things would get better, but then out of nowhere, deep equity happened. To say I was shocked, upset, frustrated, and just mad about this vote is a complete understatement. But it's not just the program itself that gave me these intense emotions. It's the fact that the teachers were never informed, asked, or even considered in this huge decision that impacts us directly. Yet our union president went in front of the board advocating for this program, saying that we engage with our membership, our teachers, and our staff who are overwhelmingly in support of this program and excited for the new opportunity. Personally, I do not know a single teacher who fully understands this program, myself included, or is behind this program. Voting on a program 4-3 with one member asking to table the vote seems irresponsible. I recall in one of the board meetings that somebody asked for a copy of the workbook before voting, and last I heard, Warren did not provide one. As an elementary school teacher, I take pride in the fact that I teach equity, inclusion, and why it is important to be different each and every year. My students do not yet see color. They are 8. The director of this new program will be compensated between $115,000 and $150,000, mixed in the high school leaders for the YES program and workbooks for teachers, and we are talking $230,000 to $260,000. From my understanding, the district and the taxpayers are already struggling, so my question is, where is this extra money coming from? I understand that Deep Equity is a teacher training program. However, there is no need for politics to drive the educational process. Rather, a culture for excellence should be promoted. The Deep Equity process demands every minority must be treated individually because they are all different. There is no recognition of a common bond as Americans. This causes more divide in our community as well as in our schools. And what does this Deep Equity program suggest teachers do to help students of color learn reading, writing, and math? Absolutely nothing. It only teaches the teachers to check their right privilege through quizzes, workbook pages, and very demeaning readings and comments. It ignores education and advises teachers that racism is the reason their non-white students cannot read, write, add, subtract, etc. Additionally, Deep Equity claims that the differences in academic performance have nothing to do with the culture or effort, yet are purely based on the product of racism. Lastly, this
Schwartz?
program.
Your time is up. Thank you. Miss Carla Macalso, is that correct? Macaluso, thank you.
My name is Carla Macaluso. I've lived in St. Charles for 21 years. I had 2 boys graduate from St. Charles East. And the reason I'm here today is I really felt compelled because I only recently learned that D303 has passed the Deep Equity program. I was not aware of the steadily falling academic scores, so I decided to do my own research to see what Deep Equity was all about. What I learned is that it's a very divisive program that carves kids into groups and labels them. It focuses on our differences rather than our commonalities. I could not find evidence of a correlation to higher test scores. I could not find evidence of racial tensions in D303. I could not find the workbooks posted online. What I did find is that schools that implemented this program a while ago, like Naperville and Edina, Minnesota, experienced test score declines and an exodus of families moving out of the district. They are more divided than ever and cannot get this for-profit divisive program out. Now that it's in, it seems to be a gateway for more of the same indoctrination like critical race theory and Project 1619. So I ask, how does equity make the student successful when you're taking away actual educational standards as teachers move their focus and already decreased time to an alternate agenda, with deep equity's goal of turning teachers into racial activists, which has nothing to do with teaching math, science, and English? I am a first-generation American. My parents came through the front door. They came for liberty. They came for freedom. They lived under communism and socialism and have seen firsthand how those things have never worked. But yet, here we are in America trying to promote the very same thing, changing our next generation into brainwashed robots, reciting propaganda and socialism that has never worked in all of history. But then if you don't know history, you're bound to repeat it, clearly a reason to change the history books. Where is the evidence of systemic racism? That would be segregated schools. It's been 50 years since the civil rights reforms greatly improved race relations. Deep equity doesn't work on race relations, it divides. I am a brown woman. I have lived in Illinois my entire life, and I personally have never felt racism. As you know, equity is not the same as equality. This is social engineering and has no place in our schools. Teachers are being sent to these workshops to learn and process and adjust their preconceived ideas about race and white dominance so they can help change the culture of racism to one of equity and social justice by correcting the attitudes of families and students. They are to resist the families, brainwashing on an epic scale financed by our tax dollars. The Student Yes program is especially sad because you want children to be turned into anti-capitalist social change agents rather than just being kids peacefully coexisting as we did. Stop teaching kids what to think and get back to teaching them how to think. So I'm requesting that you post all of the Deep Equity and Yes workbooks online, allow parents to be part of the decision in partnership, post the evidence of racial tensions, and let's vote again with the cooperation of parents before spending a nickel. If you've already plunked down
Ms.
the first
Macaluso, your time is
120,000,
up.
then chalk it up, but it's not too late to stop the implementation. If you can't, new leadership would be required. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie Stratton.
Natalie Cohen Stratton. I have two freshmen at St. Charles North. I want to tell you a little history here. I remember getting death threats as a child. I remember the swastikas painted on the fences in Schaumburg. You know who taught me to raise above the disgusting anti-Semitism that I witnessed? My parents. My parents taught me to rise above it. My freshman children have witnessed anti-Semitism here in good St. Charles since middle school. And let me tell you, anti-Semitism is on the rise. You know who teaches my children to rise above it? Me, as a parent. And they're fine. My husband and I guided them, taught them to stay strong and ignore their ignorant bullies. We as parents make sure they understood their religion and their heritage. That is my job. My kids are good students. They excel in their athletics of choice, and they have good social friends. I've given you two students eager to learn. Now it's your job as educators to teach them English, math, science, and electives to help them prepare for their careers and life passions that are beyond my expertise. That is your job as educators. You have approved deep equity, even though the community and even the board was split. Some states are even passing legislation against it. You are deflecting your failed responsibilities as educators on the lack of equity. The decline in D303 grades and SAT scores has been happening for years. These score declines are across the board of all races, genders, and creeds. Now, it is my job as a parent to make sure my kids know their heritage, know their religion, to ensure they have the materials and equipment prepared for school and all of their interests. It is my job as a parent to teach my kids pride and respect. Now, before you blame my whiteness on this attitude, know this. My white husband was so poor as a child that he remembers sometimes having a potato for dinner. My family, we were not the Jewish rich kids. I put myself through school with good grades and work. Now, both my husband and I, up until about 10 years ago, we both worked full-time jobs, and at any given time, one of us worked a part-time job. So we could achieve the American dream, a beautiful home, have cars, and put our children through D303. So stop deflecting your failings on the education decline that we are all witnessing, that we all see through the test scores, on this inequity issue. I am the parent of my children. I will raise and parent and guide my children. You are the educators. Educate my children and stop deflecting. Your expertise as educators are beyond my capacity. Just like my expertise as a parent and my children are beyond your capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura DeSazio.
Laura Stasio. We are new residents of St. Charles as of November. Hearing that the board passed deep equity, we came from deep equity, Naperville. That's why we moved here. And to now know it's here, I support what Carla said earlier, is a disappointment. My tax dollars are going to be very disappointed here. So I hope you all wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
Mitch Bridges.
I'm Mitch Bridges. Quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. This push for equity, in my mind, as a parent of students in D303, is nothing more than another convoluted way to force racist thinking and behavior on our children and in our schools, and it needs to be rejected immediately. We are all equal, all of us. We moved to St. Charles to be a part of the great schools here, but this discussion of treating some students differently based on the color of their skin has us seriously questioning our decision, and even has us seriously considering moving out of the district. If there are teachers treating children differently based on the color of their skin, with more detentions or more suspensions, we should investigate that on an individual basis separately, and if needed, remove them from the classroom. There's no place for racism in our schools, either by a single perpetrator or elected school board forcing it upon our children under the guise of equity. We've been through this already as a nation. It doesn't work when you treat people differently based on how they look. Why are you bringing us backwards? And how many signatures, actual question, how many signatures would I have to bring from the community to get you to revote and remove this? I'll follow up with an email. I hope you can come up with an answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to committee reports. We actually approved several committees at the special meeting, the minutes for those committee meetings. So we have just Citizens Advisory at this time. So Mrs. McCabe, would you read the Citizens Advisory?
We had 2 CAC meetings this week. One was with the executive team on May 5th, and then on May 6th, the facilities committee met. We called the executive team together. This was an open meeting, so you can hear the conversation, and it was on Zoom, so you can also see it. We asked the exec team to debrief with us on how they saw the facility master plan process working. And we want it, because they're very close to being finished, they're going to be presenting to us, I believe, June 3rd. I had the date somewhere. So what they told us was, I think was very helpful. We asked them to give us their strengths and challenges of the process. So that the strengths they saw was the amount of data that was made available was timely and clear. The small group was very powerful, with each group identifying the needs within their topic area. The collaboration of the full group and openness of discussions when bringing the small group to work together was great. The structured activities to obtain consensus was efficient for gathering information quickly. The tours were eye-opening and very helpful. They provided opportunities to make some comparisons. And our architect, Wold, had the ability to drill down and summarize the conversations and make things more actionable as a group. They were very supportive of how Wold has held the process and felt that they were able to be sure that the need statements were clear. There were challenges, however. It was one of the things Mrs. Barker and I wanted to be sure was that all voices were heard. But no matter how many times we invited people, some folks chose not to speak. And so the exec team said it did not know why people chose not to be part of the conversations. However, they were part of the decision-making in setting the priorities of the need statements. When another challenge was that when the financial components came with for some of the ideas that they were going to present to us, it was a little eye-shocking. And so they ended up stuck for a little while and had to walk through that. The board wasn't trying to put parameters on the money, that we wanted to hear from them what they thought was best for our community. It felt like a very aggressive timetable. So it made it difficult for some people to be there at all the times and to participate fully. Sometimes statements were confusing and they lost some voices. And so they wanted to make sure that the night that they did list out their priorities, that everyone understood clearly. And I believe that occurred at that meeting. There were passionate discussions. Some voices got loud and it became a bit difficult to ascertain if it was one voice or many. So there was a lot of emotion in some of the conversations they had. As we followed through on those conversations, the exec team, Mrs. Barker and I asked the exec team if we should have a discussion with the entire facilities committee about the process. They felt that that was not appropriate at this time, that they felt that going clearly through the priority statements, the need statements, and prioritizing would help to clarify anything that anyone had. So they met on Thursday night. I was not at that meeting. Mrs. Barker was there. They did prioritize and will be coming back together May 20th to begin their presentation. Because we're a new board, I would ask that each of you be thinking of any questions that you might have regarding the facilities plan or process, or something you want to be sure is covered, so that when they do present, they have had an opportunity to be sure to cover anything that you may have wanted to be covered. We think that we have done well, but we have 2 new board members, and as time has gone on, we want to be sure that all voices are heard. So if you have any questions, if you would send those to Mrs. Ratchford as soon as possible, so that that can get to Wold, and they can make sure that those questions are part of the presentation.
I have a question, Ms. McCabe, sorry. They're getting an update on May 20th. Is that CAC board getting an update from Wold, or are we getting an update?
May 20, May 20th is when they are meeting as a facilities committee. That's the
Committee.
next time.
When's the next time this board is getting an update? Do we have any notes from either the CAC in Wold or Wold in particular? Is it just at business services, Dr. Pearson? Okay.
That's typically when we've been bringing those updates.
I
To business
feel like
services.
at the next business services, it would maybe be better if we could get more specific updates. So a specific update, because they've done so much work with the committee. Oh, Mr. Bird is behind me. Oh, he's over there. Okay, thanks. So if you could maybe give them a heads up to, at the business service meeting next month, give us a more detailed update. So we're not, for those of us that have been on the board, I'm not sure at what stage we're at to even present questions to. Does that make sense?
Right. They're going to do the full presentation. You'll probably have questions during that presentation. However, if there's something that you know right now that you're looking for that may not have been part of the charge, or
I'm not sure what they've done or what they've eliminated yet, I guess.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it would help when we've talked about this, just maybe send some of the meeting minutes to the board members to maybe catch up with where they are in the process and what they've accomplished at the last couple of meetings.
Yeah, I think there's just been a lot of discussion on the last maybe 2 months that I'm not sure that we're up to date on what's been discussed, where they're heading in solutions.
I'm not sure that I could tell you right now what the solutions all are. What they did, the last meeting was to look at the needs statements, which they did talk to us about after they did their work, they came up with the statements that they believe will help direct and guide the board in making decisions. And they were prioritizing those at their last meeting. Those, I haven't seen what those are yet, so I think that will be coming forward. We'll send the minutes to everyone and then have a discussion at business services so that you're prepared for the presentation as well.
Helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And the presentation is when? Is that at the June board meeting?
Yeah, I wanted, I thought I had it written down. I'm sorry. I thought it was June 3rd.
Okay.
Could be the 10th. 14th, okay.
Okay, so Mrs. Weibel would like to speak about her experience at Fox.
Sorry,
Fox
I
Valley
wanted to
Career
give a little
Center.
plug to the Fox Valley Career Center, just because it was Dr. Pearson said every time someone goes out there to choose their student of the year, they find it to be a wonderful experience. It was a lovely experience. It was a 5-hour experience, however, but it was a lovely experience. We got to interview 5 students. We actually could not choose a top student because they were so awesome. We had a St. Charles North candidate, but we ended up choosing 2 students to accept a scholarship on behalf of the 5 districts in the Fox Valley Co-op. The reason why I wanted to mention it specifically was that there's such an awesome opportunity there for students that want to think outside the box and do something other than the traditional track. And so I just think it's great for parents and students to look at that if they have that interest, and look at Fox Valley CC for careercenter.org and check that out. I would say sophomore year, I don't know what year, freshman year, I don't know, as soon as possible. Talk to your guidance counselor. Don't talk to the board. I mean, you can talk to us, but we don't know as much about it. But and look at whatever is interests you in tracking. They have everything from medical to manufacturing to they added cybersecurity, which I thought was super interesting. And it just is a very specific niche. And I know Dr. Pearson, Dr. Byrne have worked with Fox Valley Career Center for the last several years in working very closely with St. Charles East, St. Charles North, and making sure our students are utilizing that, and working someday with partnering with, my gosh, Compass Academy, sorry, it just came out of my head, and hoping we can bring some of their students here. So I just think it's going to be an opportunity as we continue to move forward for all districts involved. So thank you, Ms. Barker.
Thank you, Mrs. Weibel. Dr. Pearson, is there anything to share from the last intergovernmental meeting that may not have been shared?
No, it was the last meeting of several of the groups had elections that were coming up. So it was the last meeting for many of those folks. Mayor Regina, it was his last meeting. And so we spent some time recognizing the outgoing members. We have a new meeting this week on Thursday.
Okay. All right, that brings us to our 4 action items.
Warning.
Oh, do we have? I think we approved those at the special meeting.
I thought I was going to give a presentation on those, so, because we didn't give a presentation at the special meeting, but that's fine. We can, they've been approved. I'll just encourage everyone to go online and take a look at those minutes from the learning and teaching meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Okay, for action. So our first item is the K-2 phonics resource selection. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mrs. McCabe and Mr. McNally. Do we have any discussion on it?
I'd like to note that the team shared some additional insight about the relative cost of this program versus the other programs that were under consideration. And the motion here is the lowest price out of the 3 that were the top contenders. It was also the highest rated. And so it is both the best rated by the academic professionals as well as the best deal. I want to congratulate the team on putting together that analysis.
I would like to agree. That was a great analysis. I appreciated it. I know it is probably tedious to do all that work for the board, but it was very helpful and instructive. I encourage whenever necessary that we have that kind of feedback.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
I would just concur. I also wanted to add though, however, I'd like to see our resources for programs with this detail and breadth of coverage for students and academic excellence shown more to our 9th through 12th graders. I know I kind of banged on this drum before, but I think it's really important that while we continue to build the K-5, we need to really work on resources for 9 through 12. So I'm just gonna mention that again.
Any other discussion? Okay, so the discussion is closed. Ms. Marzan, the roll for vote, please.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
and Mrs. Barker.
Yes. The motion passes 7-0. Did that correctly? Thank you. Okay, so next item is the review of the fiscal year 2020-21 for D303 amended budget. And we're putting this on public display and scheduling a public hearing. And do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Fairgreaves and Mr. McNally. And Mr. Chapman, are you planning to come up to discuss anything here?
So all you're doing tonight is actually just voting to put it on display, and it'll actually be approved at the June meeting. So if Dr. Chapman will come and speak at the
At that June meeting. Okay, great. Do we have any discussion on it? No? Okay. Ms. Marzan, the roll for vote, please.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
and Mrs. Barker.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Next item, sliding scale for all-day kindergarten fees proposal. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mrs. Weibel and Mr. Lackner. And now do we have discussion?
Yes, I would like to propose a friendly amendment. The sliding scale is an attempt, I know, by this board to meet families' needs, but I find that process is not as friendly as I think I'd prefer. As you know, I would like to see all-day kindergarten be, have no fee for attending. And I'd like to move in that direction. I think the waiver is a part of that process, but I think we will still have families who it will be a hardship for them to do all-day kindergarten. And we're requesting quite a bit of paperwork in order for them to prove that they fit into our levels of need. And I don't believe we do that for any other grade. We may do that for activities, but we don't do it for any other grade. So I'd like to make a motion. I watch Mr. Moore to make sure I do this action. If we're going to do the sliding scale, then I would like for us to make every attempt to reach the goal of having no fees for all-day kindergarten in the following year, 2022, 23. And the reason for that is to hold our feet to the fire, that we will try to make every effort to make this something that the district can afford and is feasible for our community. So that's my motion.
Okay. All right, I'm going to try to do this correctly. Do I have a motion to amend the sliding scale for all-day kindergarten fees proposal with an attempt to reach the goal of no kindergarten fees by the year 2021,
22, 23 school year.
23 school year? Okay, so we just need a second then. Okay, I will second it. Okay, so do we have any discussion on the motion in front of us with the attempt to reach the goal of no kindergarten fees by 2020?
I appreciate the sentiment and the goal. I object to the idea of an open-ended financial commitment without any consideration of which elements of the budget we would take money from. And until the analysis is done by the administration that says where we're going to take that money from in order to provide this benefit, I would reject an open-ended financial commitment.
I am also in agreement with Mr. Lackner. I would not be in support of that at this time. I also appreciate the sentiment. I certainly support all-day kindergarten, even from a personal standpoint, but I also recognize, at least what the data tells us today, is there's a 34% population that we're attempting to reach through the sliding scale. And I'd like to see the results of how successful this is first, and also the impact to future budget.
I agree that all-day kindergarten, having it free would be a wonderful opportunity for our community. I also do want to be sure that we understand the financial implications. That said, I also am in favor of not charging for public education. So I want to be sure that we can meet the needs budgetary wise for our taxpayers, but also meet the needs for our parents and families. And I would appreciate getting to know all of the ins and outs and how we can make sure that that works out financially. And if there's an issue with meeting that goal for 2022, 23, I would hope that we could put some boundaries on making sure that that data is provided to the board before we could make that decision.
I'll add my sentiment to that as well. I agree, and that was the concern I had. Mr. Lackner expressed that I don't want to do things until I know where the money's coming from. And we did kind of, in a sense, we kind of made this open-ended because we said we would be discussing this in the future. When we first talked about it, we talked about the fact that at some future point, we may talk about that. But until we know where that money is going to come from, what programs are going to lose money, I'd not be in favor of it. I think we need to attend to our budget first and know where we're going to be spending the money. And once we have that nailed down, I think we can maybe have that as a future discussion, but again, I don't like it as an open-ended item.
My original comments before you make the amendment were that I can accept the sliding scale as a moderation compromise and would like to see us progress to providing this service to our families in the long run. My point to that was that a long run. Unfortunately, I do agree with the majority of the board that we need to have a data set on how it worked for those that utilized it. As someone who's gone through the FAFSA process at the table, it is not unheard of to pull all those financials together for college FAFSA. So I think it's not an undue burden on our parents, though it is, it is a pain, but it's done by every parent that applies to school now. It's required for every senior that graduates. So it almost makes sense for every kindergartner to do it now. The other thing is that I think that our budget can handle it in the long run. Dr. Chapman talks with us in business services that in the 2-year plan, 3-year plan, there's room in the budget for this to happen. But I think those projections need to be presented to the whole board and talked about in where that is coming from. So I want to say have faith that it will happen, but I can't support the amendment tonight.
Thank you. All right, my turn, I guess. I think my comment is that I don't agree that a school district should view or use its constituents or families to fund as funding sources for required grade level, which kindergarten is required. I don't think that we should be using them as a funding source beyond their predetermined tax obligations. So that is where I lie with that. I do understand the desire to have knowledge on where is the money going to come from and where does it fit within the budget and can it fit within the budget? Can we support it? I do understand that piece. So that's something that I hope in the future, early on in the next school year, we begin to look at.
And just to be perfectly clear, the amendment was the way for me to be sure that we do that. So I understand, I too do not want to mess the budget. I had a great conversation with Dr. Chapman, which is why I didn't want to make it into, we must do it as an amendment. This was a goal that expected to have documentation by the administration showing where the money would come from and where the money would be moved around. I don't like that what we did this time was when the fees came up, we said, okay, maybe we should, I want us to be well prepared, and I'd like that to be the board's goal, that if we believe in that this is a good program for kids, that we have all in front of us the kinds of information we need to have in order to make a wise decision. I'm happy to pull the amendment. Clearly, it will not pass. Is that okay to do? I made the motion, yeah.
Can I ask you to please reread the motion so I can hear it in total?
The motion with the amendment? Yes, okay. So it's the sliding scale for all-day kindergarten fees proposal with an attempt to reach the goal of no kindergarten fees by the school year 2022-23. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think I said strive.
Strive.
Strive to reach the goal of no fees for ADK in 2022.
So I understand, and I apologize for my newness. I want to understand that voting to support this would be that we are trying to reach that goal, not we have to. Okay.
But I will pull my amendment.
I have a suggestion. We're still in discussion. Was it something that we could add to board goals, to your point, or superintendent goals, which we can kick to our board retreat.
Absolutely.
Okay,
I'm fine with doing that.
I think that would be a good suggestion.
I just don't want it to be lost.
I agree with you. And my other point, can I clarify something with Dr. Chapman? Is kindergarten an even income output? The monies we bring in, aren't they output for salaries? I wouldn't call it a surplus, is it?
Yes, in past years, the fees that we charge cover the cost of the additional costs.
Okay, so it's not necessarily, it's not a surplus for us. It's to
That's
cover
correct.
the cost of the program.
No, I mean, year to year, we're doing our best to try to balance the two. So from a
Mhm.
year to year perspective, we may run a deficit. 50,000 one year. We may run a surplus. In the long term,
It's a wash.
it's
Okay, I just want to clarify that point. All right, thank you.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry for clarification. The program is roughly 800,000, so let's say 900,000. Is that correct? What I saw in the board packet? Are you saying that some years we have a 50,000 to 100,000 surplus or deficit? Are those the numbers you said?
No, so let me clarify what you see in your packet is the amount of revenue that we receive in this proposal. The actual cost is around 1.2 million. So we don't know exactly the staff that are going to be placed in the all-day kindergarten program. So that's why that number can't be exactly right. We're going to have a 1 to 5% plus or minus on a given year. Our goal is to try to be balanced.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Are we out of any statutory compliance with the state's mandate for what the district has to provide with the current setup?
No. I'm correct in my no. Okay. All right. Okay, so Mrs. McCabe has pulled her amendment to the original motion, so that brings us back to discussion on the original motion, which is the sliding scale for all-day kindergarten fees proposal. Is there any other discussion on that item? Okay, discussion closed. Ms. Marsan, would you please call roll?
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0.
Mrs. Barker, could I just make one final note since this has passed and request of district leadership that you come back to the board after kindergarten registration has happened so that we can see what the results were for this year? Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to our fourth item for action, which is the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Do I have a motion to approve Dr. Taylor for hire?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Mrs. Weibel and Mrs. McCabe, I think that was. Do we have any discussion?
I would just like to comment that, welcome, Dr. Taylor. Thank you so much. I read through your qualifications. You're very qualified. You're very astute. We welcome you. You're very passionate about providing an equitable environment for all your students and watching them excel. You have certainly done your time in research and cultural responsiveness and the MTSS system. I look forward to you joining our team. You've dealt with, your focus has been with English learners. You've worked with deep equity. I just think you bring a breadth of knowledge to our group that we are in need of. And I really look forward to having you on the team. And I really just look forward to having you work with us. This is an area that is near and dear to my heart. I have students that I'm speaking for tonight and sharing their excitement to have you on board because they have felt that they don't get the same treatment and education in our schools, which saddens me. I have seen examples of students that have not gotten the same treatment by their teachers, and therefore their grades have reflected that. And that saddens me. I've shared a lot about that at this board table. I've talked about how there's a fear issue with equity, and we'll talk about that later. And I think that what you bring to the table will help enlighten our students. And I'm just very much looking forward to you helping our students soar. So thank you very much.
I also would like to welcome you. I am very excited to have someone in this role to help lead our district. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Being a brand new board member, I wasn't a part of that vote, but I am happy that we have someone in charge of that department. And I'm sure I'll be asking you questions, but welcome and congratulations.
Welcome. I do have some questions for Dr. Pearson. So with the director, how do you see this role with the board?
Yeah, so this, Dr. Taylor will be working with the board to address any of the equity goals that are board level goals, including helping us look at our data. One very clear piece of equity work is around policy in the district. So Dr. Taylor will certainly be helping us as we unpack our policies and working through our press manual to make sure that our policies are reviewed using an equity lens. And of course, all of that is board level work. So both in looking at our disaggregated data, student data, performance data, staffing data, and then of course, our policy information.
And will it be possible, I saw that the position requires a yearly report, especially in the beginning of the findings and any audit that we do, or could we ask for updates on a very regular basis?
Yeah, what I'm hoping is that coming out of the summer retreat with the board, that you're going to have a new process for updates on board goals that will be more frequent than annually. So yes, I think that that's a great idea, and that's something we can put forward.
Can I go back and Dr. Pearson, ask Dr. Pearson a question? Would Dr. Taylor be involved in the investigative of any grievance from a student regarding inequitable treatment?
It would depend on the situation. We do have uniform grievance chairs already in the district, but she certainly could be involved in a situation, particularly if it relates to issues of discrimination or diversity. Yes.
I would really like us to investigate as a board goal, some sort of grievance venue for students, like we have a bullying hotline in regards to inequitable treatment or whether it be by student or by teacher. Because I believe there's not an avenue for that for students.
You have a policy of an anti-harassment policy, and you also have a procedure, a reporting procedure, both in building and at the district level.
I'm not sure it's being utilized because it's
But
not.
it is in your policy. So we
Yeah.
can review that and bring it back for you.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready to end discussion, or do we? have more?
No,
Oh,
I just have
Mr.
a
Malley,
quick
sorry.
comment. So our need for equity sprung out of a DNF report. And so I want to be sure that this is going to be kind of front and center is academic concerns as we proceed. This, when we first started talking about deep equity, diversity director and things like this, it came from a DNF report, which is an academic concern. And as you know, academic concerns are near and dear to my heart. So I would like to make sure that as we proceed with this, this is kind of the primary focus, that academic concerns, because this is an academic institution, are going to be the primary concern in this position.
Any other discussion? I would like to add, though, it wasn't only a DNF report. We also looked at numerous different data. We did look at iReady data. We looked at IR data. We looked at PSAT and SAT data too. So there, in addition to the DNF report.
And just to clarify, Mrs. Barker, equity became a goal of ours in June,
That's when we did set the
Yeah.
priorities.
before a DNF report came out. So this has been a board goal for about a year.
It has been. However, this specific position as well as deep equity became specific points of discussion after the DNF report, and that was used as the impetus for this discussion. So again, academic concerns are what we are supposed to be about. So I want to make sure that we are working on academic concerns for all students.
Anything else?
I just wanted to ask a question. The goals, being a new board member, I'm sorry, I should just have a statement that says that.
Get
The
this out.
goals that you're referring to in June, is that available for the general public or any board member, should they be new, to find those, and where can I?
They're on the website. If you look under the superintendent's evaluation. And I think it's listed right above the superintendent's evaluation or the evaluation document for the end of the year evaluation also has them on there, those goals.
And that's available to the general public as well?
Yes.
They are, yes.
And Mrs. Bell, you'll
Thank
see
you.
that we actually, our mission is to take care of the whole child, which includes their social, emotional learning, not just their academic concerns.
So during the meeting, I would ask that everybody in the audience doesn't just blurt out. It makes it difficult to hear or know what's going on during the meeting. Okay, Mrs. Bell, I will make sure that you have those things if you don't already, since you don't already. I thought those were in the numerous items that you were sent recently.
My light reading?
Your light reading, yes.
Well, yes, it's just hard to, it could totally be, I'm just trying to figure out where to look for what. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate the direction. Thank you.
Okay, so is there any other discussion before we close? No? Okay. Mrs. Marsan, will you please call the roll?
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, so our next item is the consent agenda. I'd like to ask if anyone wants to pull anything from the consent. I'm taking that as a no. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Weibel and Mrs. Bell. Mrs. Marsan, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Weibel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. And that will bring us all the way to our for information section. I just want to remind everyone that the following pieces of information are available to you, board members. The freedom of our FOIA requests, our D303 financial report from March of 2021, the Mid-Valley financial report from March of 2021, the district enrollment, and the COVID-19 financial impact summary, and the PTAB update. And now on to new business. The next item will be the board committee assignments. I'm going to thank all of you for taking the time to think about how it is you want to work on this board and sending in your preferences. I did review your requests and with deep thought. I did consult the other board officers, Mrs. Fairgraves and Mrs. McCabe. to make these decisions. There are 4 major committees that will have 2 equal co-chairs collaborating on planning and facilitation of the following committees: Learning and Teaching, Mr. McNally and Mrs. Weibel. Business Services, Mrs. Fairgreaves and Mr. Lackner. Citizens Advisory, or CAC, Mrs. McCabe and Mrs. Bell. And then Policy, Mrs. McCabe and Mr. Lackner. Other appointments are as follows. For DPTO, Mrs. McCabe and Mrs. Fairgrieve. For Legislative Liaison, which this is a new appointment. This person will liaise between the IASB, ISB, state and federal officials to communicate their activities and to serve as an official go-between. Mrs. Weibel will serve in this role for this school year. Housing. I will take care of housing. And intergovernmental, I will also take care of intergovernmental. I will not be announcing the safety and discipline. I know that board members typically serve on those. They are superintendent committees, and Dr. Pearson will be in touch for those that expressed interest. Are there any questions?
Yeah, where did the legislative liaison come from? I don't remember a discussion about that, so just wondering where the committee came from for the assignment.
It is typically something that other boards have. The president will often do it. With all of the things going on in legislation and going on in our state and beyond, I thought it would be a good idea to have somebody who was bringing that information to us and perhaps bringing information to others that we would like to have that done with. Any other questions? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to the IASB resolutions timeline. This is really just to get you thinking about something if you would like. But the submission for resolutions is due in June. I believe that's June 23rd. Yep, June 23rd is the deadline to submit resolutions. So if there is something that you're thinking, please do communicate with me so that we can bring that back to the board. Does anyone have any discussion on that item? Not at this time. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the 2021-22 school year plan, which I know everyone's very excited about. Dr. Pearson, will you tell us about the progress on the plans for next school year?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Barker. We added this to the agenda just so we could provide you with an update on how we're progressing towards our plan for the 2021-22 school year. I mentioned in my superintendent's report that there are some pieces of information that we're still looking forward to having from the state related to any changes in guidelines. It's looking very promising as now it looks like younger students are able to be vaccinated as of today, and that as we have lower infection rates and across the state, it seems as if they're opening up many of the restrictions that we've had previously. However, I did want to mention, we have been having the instruction task force meet since end of February, early March. And we're actually going to go ahead and reactivate all of the other task force teams to have kind of an end of year meeting, as well as to talk about any issues that we need to consider as we look forward to the beginning of the school year. As I've mentioned previously, we are having full school days at all 3 levels. And so to prepare for that, we just want to make sure that we're not missing anything. So if you remember, the task force committees are made up of community members, parents, staff members, teachers, administrators, and they are in the following categories. There's one for social and emotional health and well-being. There's one for building health and safety. There's one for transportation and food service. There's one for communications, and then there's one for staffing and human resources, in addition to the instruction group, which has been meeting to look at both remote and in-person learning. So what we're hoping is that these groups will have a meeting between now and the end of the year, have an opportunity to review the school year, and then also look at any recommendations going forward. And then we plan to continue to update the board regularly on the progress, and we should be producing another kind of opening a fall 2021 opening of schools document with any updated information.
Discussion?
Dr. Pearson, you mentioned in your opening superintendent's report that there was some information on the mask mandate that you might expect at a later point. I think it'd be valuable for us to consider where the guidance associated with the state and the county public health ends and where the mandate and authority of the school board begins. I think there's some lack of clarity about where those guidelines begin and end, and where they are mandates for us to follow, dictated by the state and by existing statute, and where we have flexibility. So as those new guidelines come out, perhaps we can have a review associated with what's in the state and the county public health court versus what is District 303 policy, and to create some clarity around that.
Sure,
difference.
absolutely.
I would agree. I would like to have some of those items clarified. I know there's been so much change and there's been so many things put out there by different groups, and where do we fall? Where does our local control begin and end? Would be very helpful. Any other discussion? Okay. Great. The next item is the superintendent evaluation process / timeline. Mrs. McCabe and I are going to go over this information tonight, and we're going to start that process. The process for superintendent evaluation was previously a closed session item. It now needs to be discussed in open session. You have a few items in front of you, I hope, in regards to the evaluation. If you would turn your attention to the timeline, you'll notice the dates have changed. This is due to a few items. The election did go a little longer than initially anticipated. One of the dates was a graduation date and had to be changed. And then we also needed to be able to discuss this in open session, so it backed us up a little bit. So you have a copy of that. Then you have a copy of an example of the annual or end of the year evaluation format. And then the superintendent evaluation process document for IESB. Mrs. McCabe, would you like to talk about the worksheet and the dates that you need things by?
You each received today a link to a Google Doc that is a superintendent worksheet, evaluation worksheet. This is just for, this is to help you in determining and making comments for the different goals for the superintendent. We would like this to be by Friday, May 15th, which is what, 4 days from now. We know that this is a rush, but we hope that you'll be able to get that. If you can't, if you would just let me know, and I'll, see how quickly we can turn it around. You should be able to type right on it, and then you can share it with me as well. You can make a copy, you can print it up, whatever you want, but we hope that that'll make it a little easier for you in responding.
We know it's a short turnaround time, but we would like to keep on track for the original delivery date of June 7th. And this will allow us to have 2 discussion sessions regarding the information we all put in.
If I could just make a comment, just kind of a reminder, acknowledgement, even though we have a short timeline, it's really important, I think, for each of us to include as many specific examples as possible to support whatever your rating might be, even if it's excellent. It's very important to have examples, and it'll make our discussion on Monday be a lot more productive.
Any other discussion?
And the goals are included in the package here that you got.
Dr. Pearson, you have provided us with sort of a written update prior to an evaluation period in the past. Are you able to do that?
Yeah, I can update your quarterly update, which was comprehensive through the end of March. So we can just update the April information for you and get that out.
Okay, thank you.
Can we make sure that Mr. Lackner and Ms.
Is it possible to have that before I fill this out? Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything they would like to add? No, okay, thank you. Okay, so that brings us for discussion, for discussion. And our first item is deep equity. This is on for discussion today for an update, as well as a little discussion about that update.
So Mrs. Barker asked me just to come and share with you kind of where we are in the process with the deep equity implementation that you have approved. There really are three sections to this program in the district. The first phase is actually training for administrators and administrative leadership team across the district. That's the phase that we've already started, and those training dates, there was one in April, there was one last week in May, there's one in June, and there's one in July for the administrative leadership team across the district to have the training that they need in the deep equity materials. One of the benefits, deep equity actually had Trudy Arriaga, who is the retired superintendent of Ventura County, California, or from Ventura, California. And she has been our trainer. So she's worked very closely with Dr. Roosh to kind of align our district training with the state standards for leadership, particularly the cultural awareness standards that are part of the Administrator Academy program, which every administrator in the state that has a license has to have one academy a year. And so for this first training, because she aligned kind of her work with the training, with the standards, we are able to offer Administrator Academy credit for that. So our administrators will be able to get their Administrator Academy for this year. And then the second step is actually the school leadership team training, which is the part that begins in the end of July, early August. That's where each building gets to have a team of 5 to 7 staff members in addition to the principal to be trained also in the equity, the deep equity framework. And that training goes through the fall and into the spring. So there's a session in July, there's a day in October, and then there's a day in January, I believe. And then the third component that you approved was the YES program, which are the 2 high school clubs, one for North and one for East High School. So really of the 3 phases, the only phase that has been implemented so far is the administrator training. I will tell you that just the feedback that we've received so far from our administrators is that they are finding the training to be helpful. We asked in 2 areas whether they felt like it was helping them develop skills that they needed for school leadership, which they, most of them rated very highly, the training in that category. And then we also asked them if it would be helpful for them as they plan for their school improvement work. And they also said that they find the training to be beneficial. So again, that's at the administrator level, and it's not at the building level yet. And that's the only phase that we've implemented so far.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pearson. Is there any discussion or questions that we have?
Just have a clarifying question. What is the total cost of the program? And is there?
And
I'm
I guess
sorry,
my,
we've asked you to be quiet in the audience while we are having a board meeting. President Barker asked you. We do not want to have to ask you again or you'll be removed. Okay, no problem.
and I guess just to follow up to that, if we have made any type of progress payment towards the contract, I don't know what that is, so I'd like to know.
Yeah, so we'll have to find that out too. Dr. Chapman, do you know if we've made any payment towards deep equity? Yeah, the staff component is $83,021.78. The student component is $36,000 to $36,004.95 for a total of $119,026.73.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Pearson, I'm a big fan of Zaretta Hammond, who talks about the academic part of the culturally responsive, and I've learned a ton from that work. Do you see, and maybe Dr. Taylor's not here. I would like to see that we are moving in that direction so that the academic part is significant. I agree with Ms. Weibel that we want students to feel good, and it's not just feel good. We want them to feel safe. We want them to feel that this is a community that includes them, and that this is a school district that actually accelerates their learning. That's where I'm a little concerned about instruction, and instruction is my feeling. I think it's real important for us to be sure that our biases are out of the way on any level, that we're not enabling, that we are also encouraging, and that we are looking to do our very best for all kids. And I think that instruction is an area that we need to address pretty significantly, which is one of the reasons why I want an audit that helps us to focus in on where our areas of need are. I have heard a few administrators talk about the deep equity work, and it was important work. The way that they began to look at the biases they have. And I do believe that good people have bias. What I hope is that people who have bias begin to think clearly about how that impacts children and families. And so I would like to be sure that we have an audit that tells us where we need to work, because I believe we have hidden rules that not everyone knows about, and that we need to make sure everyone has access to the best education and the opportunities. So I'm hoping that if it isn't in the program of deep equity, that it is in the work that we do.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. I want to share with you guys a quote from a student that communicated with me their feelings on deep equity being on the agenda for discussion. Some honestly don't see the value, and that's not all right. As board members, you have a civic duty to uphold the highest priority to provide a sufficient and satisfactory education for all students, regardless of status or ethnic values. We were built upon the foundation of education and strong morals. Some don't believe in the results, and that's a mistake on their part. The board wonders why students keep transferring out of this community. It's because we don't implement programs like this. That is a powerful statement coming from one of our students that I referenced earlier, that does not feel as if we treat all students the same. Academically, socially, emotionally, all of the above. I think it's really important to go forward with deep equity. I went through the materials. I tried to actually check them out, but they were in the hands of two of my other board members. The physical copies, we only got 2 physical copies. Mr. McNally had it and Ms. Fairgrave had it. So I was able to go online. We all got the link online to utilize for a week or so. And then we had 2 sets of books, workbooks, both for the training, for the training program, the train the trainer program, and the YES program. So we had a week to look at all the materials. They were hundreds and hundreds of pages of materials. I went through it all. My colleagues had the opportunity to go through it all. I don't know if they did or not. I'm not the police on that. But we had opportunity to go through all the workbooks. None of the pages offended me as a Caucasian woman sitting here. Now, that's just my opinion. What it did show me is that there's an opportunity to speak to students of different ethnic backgrounds in a different way. I've learned a lot being with the RISE group in South Elgin these last several months. I understand that their workbooks can't be published because they're proprietary. And then I also spoke with people at Deep Equity, and they explained more about the YES program because I had concerns about that. I do worry about the fact that there's rumors circulating about there's a curriculum piece. There is not a curriculum piece to this program. It is a professional development program. The YES program asked 75 volunteers from 2 high schools. So 75 volunteers, 9th through 12th graders. So if their parents sign off, they can participate in the program. So to me, there's not an indoctrination of 13,000 students. Again, I understand that, as I spoke last time, this is a fear issue. I feel like even listening tonight to one of our educators, hearing that there wasn't workbooks, that we're struggling financially, those are both statements that sadly are not true. And so we're obviously not doing a good job of communicating this out to our own staff, to our students and parents. So I feel like we as a board and as a district need to own that and do a better job of doing that and talk about what it truly is, what it's about, even if we can't share the information specifically because there's copyright proprietary rules about that, which I think a lot of people in business would understand. We can at least share some of the things we've talked about here tonight and more specifics about the gist of what it contains. So I think we have a responsibility to do that as a board, and as a district and as a team. So I'd like to see us do a better job of that. I think that's it. Sorry, I had a lot of notes. I was gonna say, I think it's really important for us to hold each other accountable. So for those that don't feel like this is the program for them to support, I'd like to hear specifically what in the materials is what you don't like about or what you don't want to support about the program instead of we just don't want to. So I think that's what I would be asking my colleagues today.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. I am not necessarily not supportive of deep equity. What I am not supportive of is that we have no strategy around equity and inclusion to this point. We don't really know what this will address, what gaps that we may have that it will close. And there is no focus on the instructional aspect to Mrs. McCabe's point. I felt very strongly that we did need a director in place, which I voted for. I think that's very important to move our district forward in what needs we have. How do we identify those needs? Through an audit, which I think is critical to identify what we need to address the issues that we have. I would tell you anecdotally that over the course of the last 6 weeks or so, I have had multiple examples sent to me that I have shared with Dr. Pearson from parents that they have received from their students around class materials that we may or may not agree with and that are appropriately delivered to address equity and inclusion. And some of these are coming from high school students that clearly do not feel comfortable with what is being instructed by the teacher at the time, that they're taking screenshots of these things and sending it to their parents to be addressed. That goes back to, in my mind, we do not have a strategy and we have not equipped our teachers to be able to address these issues in an appropriate way so that all of the students feel comfortable with what is being discussed or addressed.
I do, and I understand what you're saying about strategy. I do, I'm all about having strategies to address different issues that we may need to address. I do want to just make sure that everybody is aware that what Mrs. Fairgrave was talking about is not deep equity curriculum. It's just some illustration about why it's important to have strategy around this issue.
Yes, that's true. But again, I would go back to, I don't know what deep equity is intending to address in our district because we really have not done any type of conclusive audit with findings. So that's my point.
I'd like to offer two things. There are two members of the board here present who have seen none of the deep equity material since it was voted on literally my first day on the board, the day I was sworn in. I've seen none of those items. I don't believe Mrs. Bell has had the opportunity to see them either. I would also remind the board that the aim as it's reflected in the published goals in item 5 reads thusly: by March 2021, develop a plan to create a culture that supports equity, diversity, and inclusion for CU's for Community Unit School District 303 students and staff that reflects our diverse society and develops skills in appreciating differences, overcoming conflicts, and contributing to society. The action is select an outside organization to assist the district in completing an equity audit. None of the materials associated with deep equity relax the necessity for that audit.
Can I ask a question for clarification? The goals that were identified in June, that was a goal because it was a perceived need in the community, or it's not that I totally support equity. I'm curious if I was surprised to hear Mrs. McCabe say that we need to have an audit. I would think that that would be inherent to a need. I can't speak to whether we have this need in our district or not based on, based on knowing that I would always support equity. I want to know, did we make that goal before we had that audit? How did that become a goal? Or is maybe that too big of a question right here? I'm confused.
Well, there are a couple ways. So we had been looking at data that was identifying that there was issues of equity. We also, when we set priorities, the equity was a priority the board did set. Dr. Pearson, would you say that that's the correct timeline?
Yeah, that sounds right.
So that is how the goal then came to be. So it was looking at data throughout the year and then identifying that as a priority.
Okay, thank you. That helps. One other question then to Mrs. McCabe. What sort of audit would you suggest that might point us in the right direction?
Thank you for asking. My experience has been that we had a school district where I was a teacher. We had a team come in and they did focus groups. They did policy review, and clearly that district had work to do. I've wanted an audit, and I voted for deep equity because I believe professional learning is a critical piece in all of this. But I think in order to hone in and to get going, we need to know what areas where we can work. I had talked to Dr. Pearson and had mentioned it here at the board table that IEA provides that an audit. I'm not sure where, I think there've been some looking around at that. IEA is the state teachers, the organization at the state level for the teachers union. And since we were hearing that teachers felt they weren't included in the selection of deep equity, though they have had many conversations about bias and making sure that they are being equitable with all students. IEA seems like the right direction to go. That's just my idea. It isn't an idea that the board has voted on or that the administration has also recommended to us. But I think having that data, that evidence in front, then begins us to have the conversation, where do we need to really hone in and work and make things happen? Our data is not good for all of our kids, and we need to take care of that business. It could very well be that we have work to do at this board table and what we need to do. And I would like to know how that work will be focused on, and have a conversation as a board about our own biases and make sure that we are not walking in with our eyes closed, or that we are making assumptions about children that is not fair. So I think we have a lot of work to do. Mr. Lackner said we are past our deadline. We do not have a plan. We do not have a strategic plan towards this. I know that it's something that it's taken us a while to do on a lot of fronts. So I'm hoping that with the new board, we can get going. And if we can get an audit in place with some evidence to come back before too long, I think we'll have some meat to work on.
And just to reiterate quickly, because we did discuss the audit before at the table, but I think other board members would agree. I think we would be prudent to look at several different sources for facilitating that audit, and not just the Illinois Educator Association.
Mrs. Fairgrave, can I just clarify one thing? So I want to make sure I'm actively listening to what you said. It sounds like some teachers are using whatever strategies they have in their fingertips. Do we know, one, if they feel like there's a need to do that, or if they're doing it because there's a need in the classroom, or they feel like it's something that they should be doing? I don't know, you might not have that answer. And two, I'm just wondering if they're doing that, don't we feel like it would be obvious that we need to provide them the correct tool, a correct tool? I'm not saying this is particularly the correct tool, but a correct tool in which to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion.
I don't have the answer.
And I'm putting that one out to the whole board.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to the first one. I don't know. My impression and from the feedback I've gotten, that it is teachers are pulling things that they might have at their fingertips. I would go back to, again, if we had an audit that understood where our needs were, and or we had identified places in curriculum where it is appropriate, that would be one thing. But I have not seen evidence that we have done that. I do know, though, to give a real-time example. I mean, there's instruction where we're utilizing as an example, the rapper, the Little Nas X rapper. And I would say, I think there are better examples that we could use that have done things in our history instead of something like that.
And Dr. Pearson, you've seen these examples that Mrs. Fairgrave has given you.
Mrs.
In your expertise, why do you think that the teachers are pulling equity examples? Do you think they're looking for their own tools because they feel like there's a need, or in the classroom, or do you think that, I mean, would it help them to provide them a tool sooner than later? Or is it something that they feel like they should be doing? So they're just pulling social examples.
Yeah, I would want to be careful about making any, generalizations about what's happening. But what I would say is that teachers are doing the best that they can with what they have, right? And so often they're finding supplemental resources that align with maybe a unit of study that's happening in the curriculum. And sometimes they deal with issues of equity, or they could deal with issues of diversity. And I think having some training for teachers about how do you vet those kinds of materials when you're making decisions about instructional materials is really important. And that's a component of some of this work that we're doing in helping building teams to train other educators about what lens do we use when we're looking at the materials that we're using in our classrooms. Because not all materials that teachers use come directly from the district curriculum. I mean, they're supplementing all the time. They're finding videos, they're finding examples online, they're finding examples from other teachers that teach the same subject. So having the right lens to apply is really important. And I think in every case that I've seen, it was teachers trying to do that, and we needed to maybe ask some more questions about why we would pick that particular material.
And that's what I was going to ask you, because you've gone through a portion of this particular program. Is there a component there where they help train them on that filter? I don't remember.
Yeah, what
going-
Mrs.
everyone through the
McCabe was
workforce.
talking about with Soretta Hammond and some other people that do that work is that there's a whole set of work in the equity work around called culturally responsive teaching practices, which is just an awareness of some of those instructional strategies and practices that teachers should be using in the classroom. And yes, this is a component. As a matter of fact, the trainer that we have actually wrote a book and teaches at the university level on culturally responsive teaching. And so she plans to bring that as a part of our training.
Dr. Pearson, in the January board meeting, Dr. Herman talked about the role that parents would play in the further development of the equity program as part of the presentation introducing deep equity. What's the plan for community involvement in the equity work?
So we do plan to have a district equity team that would be led by a new equity director, Dr. Taylor, who you approved tonight, and there would be some parents that would be represented on that team. We'd be looking for some volunteers, and actually, I believe we already have solicited. Some people have come forward and said we're very interested in supporting that work. And so it would be a district team like many of our other curriculum teams where there are parents, staff members.
So if
that
I
are
hear you
represented.
rightly, you're looking for volunteers for parent
Correct.
involvement in the equity effort. Is that
Anyone-
right? Do I
Yes,
have that right?
correct. Anyone that's interested can contact Mrs. Smith at the district or Dr. Herman, and we can get you connected.
Dr. Pearson, do you see a possibility of the Citizens Advisory Committee having a role in some of this work?
I think certainly that it could very well, particularly when we do the equity audit. I think it also might be nice to have some training with them. And so those are components that could be brought forward.
Tell me, Dr. Pearson, is the Citizens Advisory Committee, is that an elected or appointed group, or is that also a group of volunteers?
The CAC is actually a group of volunteers. They applied and then they were interviewed and selected.
And when they applied, which issue areas were they asked to think about as they applied to be part of the Citizens Advisory Committee?
It wasn't a specific issue. They
It was
were
just open-ended?
going, it was open-ended. It's what the needs of the board would be. Right now, they're deep into the facilities work. We did assume when it was over that we would pursue some pieces surrounding equity with them, as well as other topics.
Can I ask a question, please? I wanted to make a question to how can we make sure that getting an audit is a top priority? Would that be making it one of our goals to discuss at our retreat? How would we do that?
So just currently an action item on that goal. So it needs to be, I guess, we need to figure out how to get it done.
Yeah, so we actually started with the National Equity Project, which is out of California. Initial conversation was to try to get them to come and help us. I have since talked to a couple of other organizations. Mr. Blomquist and I, or Mr. Blomquist reached out to IEA and we've got a conversation scheduled with them. Interesting, many of them are actually suggest that you do some professional learning before you do your audit because it informs the conversation as people have a better lens to use to look at the information and the data that they're collecting. And so, I think the timing of that is one of the questions that's out there with some of these agencies is at what point do you do the audit? or if you just want somebody to come in. So there are several groups that will do that for us, and I'm happy to compile that and bring that to the board. And you can kind of hear their proposal and sequence of how they think you should approach it, and then you can decide what makes the most sense for the information that you need.
Okay, one other thing that I would want to say about equity in general is that I believe it's a human issue, it's a community issue, and it isn't, in my opinion, it isn't about color or age or race or sexuality. It's about all of it. And I would say for me as a goal for me, and a goal that I wish for this board is that we look at it that way. And it's a community issue. It's not a race issue or sexuality per se. It's really all of it. And I think that will help us do this work better. And I think equity is important work, and I'm glad we're doing it. I want to just ask that we, as a board, hold ourselves to that goal, that this is a community issue, and we have to listen to all the constituents, students, staff, board, everything.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
So I'll agree with what Mrs. Bell just said. We have to listen to everyone's concerns, and that's one of the areas that I have a concern with about this program. The program requires that there are certain assumptions made that not everyone agrees with. And in fact, a significant portion of the public doesn't agree with some of the assumptions that are required in order to proceed with the program. I think it's incumbent to show why we need the program as opposed to why we should oppose it. I think it's important. It's incumbent that we have to know why we need it. And that's why I suggested that we start by looking in our PLCs. We start by taking that approach, addressing individual concerns, and see if we can show improvement. One of the pieces of data that I had asked for, and it was long awaited, took a long time to get it, but it was how we performed relative to districts that were similar and surrounding, as well as in those subgroups, as well as districts that served primarily those subgroups. And in conversation with Dr. Pearson, it appears that we fare quite well against districts that serve those individual subgroups. And from my recollection, we were high on the list as far as performance against the similar and surrounding districts for those subgroups. So what that tells me is that we may not have as large a problem, as large an issue. And so I would like to take this as a PLC approach as opposed to using a group like Deep Equity that's expensive. It's an outside group that doesn't know our community. And we call this an audit. I think we need to essentially do that. And that's one of the ways to perform that audit is to utilize the PLCs. There are an awful lot of people who don't know what this program is. There are an awful lot of people in the community who don't know. There are teachers, obviously, that don't know, and we're not involved in the discussion. We were led to believe that the union had supported this program, and in my conversation with the union president the day after we had a discussion about this, he had told me that there was absolutely no discussion about this program. Certainly, there was discussion about equity. I don't think there's anybody in this room who doesn't want equitable treatment for all. It's a matter of how to get there. And I think we need to make sure we have opposing viewpoints represented as well. Just because I think we have people that are making assumptions. I think that this program forces assumptions that not everyone agrees are assumptions that need to be made or that are actually accurate. So before we proceed with a program like Deep Equity, I would prefer that we take a look and see what our actual needs are. Again, everyone's goal is equitable treatment for all students. I'd like to see high performance for all students regardless of their background. But I want to do this the right way, and I want to see that for me, equity, educational equity is the way to go. And that's the way to provide equity in society, is to provide real educational equity, and to kind of divert time and attention to this takes away from academics. And I think we need to be focusing more on our academics.
Is it possible, since this is well, I can't think of it, copyrighted information, is it possible to have a copy or that available to the general public in the community where they can come and look at it as a reference? Obviously not take it home or check it out, but could the members of the public be able to look at a copy of this somewhere in the district administration building or something?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Dr. Pearson, would it be possible to ask?
We'll have to ask Warren Press.
Yeah, we couldn't put it out there since it's proprietary.
That's the word, proprietary. Thank you. I just think maybe if it's proprietary, other places are, with reference material and things, they allow you to come and view it, but not take it for copies. But maybe people can look at it that way.
Okay. Mr. McNally, I want to make sure I was clear in what you were asking towards the end there. So you are looking to have the audit done so we can determine if you want to continue with deep equity. Is that what I was hearing?
I think we aren't sure how we're going to do the audit, and I'm suggesting that if we're not sure, then the PLC approach might be a way to start and gather some information. And if that's the direction we go, great. If that indicates that we need to go deeper for an audit, then perhaps we do that. But I think we start in-house. I think that's the way probably any business would do this, is you try to solve your problems in-house before you hire somebody outside as a consultant. So I just, here's my concern. We had, the night we voted on this, I had expressed concerns about the fact that there was a false statement about whether or not a workbook existed. We had obfuscated information about teacher union and teachers union leadership support, which later indicated that there was not support for this particular program, although there was support for equity in general. And we had a delay of information. I had asked for information in January and I didn't get it until March 5th for a meeting on March 8th, March 5th being a Friday for that. So there was no way for me to even contact the districts from which the information was gleaned to determine anything about it, really, validity or anything else. And so we voted on something. So I would like to call again to rescind the vote and rescind our support for deep equity. So if I have to make that as a
Okay.
motion, I will make that as a motion.
So and we're in discussion, so we can't make a motion on anything right now, but as I said in my email, so rescind involves going to court. So we can't rescind. We can't reconsider because of the Roberts rules and how that works, but you can make a new motion. And I will definitely, if that's desired, put that on the June for action.
I would like to do that.
We'll do.
Is a second needed or is that sufficient?
No, we can't make a motion, but yes, but if there's other board members who would like to see a termination for contract on for action at the board meeting, then you can speak up at this time.
Yes, I would be in support of seeing that on the June meeting.
Can I ask a question for clarification from you, Mr. McNally? I heard Mrs. Weibel talk about the materials that were checked out or the physical copies. Are you saying those were made available on March? Did you say 5th for a March 8th vote?
No, the materials were.
Understand.
So we had, a question was asked, actually, I was not the one who asked, I believe Mrs. Fairgrave had asked the question regarding workbook, and we were told there was no workbook, and minutes later, the workbook was referenced. So I had said that I would like I would like to see the workbook. So that is the material that I was referencing with regard to that. I had asked in that January meeting, I had asked for information regarding comparisons of our district subgroups, the affected subgroups, to similar and surrounding districts, those same subgroups and similar and surrounding districts, as well as to districts that primarily serve those subgroups. The reason for that request is that if we were sitting at the bottom of all of that pile, then I would say we have a big problem. If we were not sitting at the bottom, if we were sitting near the top, I would say that perhaps we are, not to put too fine a point on it, but perhaps more solution than problem. In other words, maybe we're doing a lot of things right. I'd like to take a look and see, what are we doing right? How are we addressing these problems? What are the good things we're doing? What are the bad things we're doing? What are the good things these other districts are doing? What are the things that maybe don't need to be considered from those other districts? But I think we do that before we go into a group that frankly, there's a lot of controversy, not just here, but nationally about this particular group. And again, it makes assumptions that a lot of people don't want to make, that they don't agree with.
But I understand that part. I'm confused on I want to be sure I understand so I don't get myself in that situation. I'm trying to clarify, when you asked for materials, you said was January and you got them on the 5th of March? I'm
No,
sorry.
not the materials. The materials I got a week or so later, I think. It wasn't the materials. It was information regarding
Oh, the
comparisons.
comparison. Okay, so
Comparison.
that was
day-
actually given to you 3 days prior?
That was given to me on March 5th on a Friday for a Monday meeting. And I had requested, as I say, in mid to late January.
Okay, was it
So-
is that available for me to find that information on meeting notes or agenda or something?
It is, I believe it was Dr. Pearson, it was in your superintendent's report if I,
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I would like to see that too.
yeah, it
And
was
is
not sent via email that I recall.
Okay. Is it like a big comprehensive, is it like this?
No, I don't think it's that thick.
Okay, I'm just,
I don't think
okay,
so.
okay, perfect. So it's going to be easy enough for me to,
So
Yes,
Dr. Pearson,
thank you.
we just, to Mr. Lackner's comment earlier, we just want to make sure that Mr. Lackner and Mrs. Bell also get copies of the workbooks for both programs and then for the YES program to review whether you'd like them in paper or electronic. You guys clarify that out, but since the rest of us have had access to them, it's certainly, you need ample access. They're very large, so.
I do think that the online version is much more comprehensive as far as what you see. You see some other pieces to it that aren't in a paper copy.
I would appreciate that for online, then I can take it with me. So I'm not lugging out copies of these. Thank you for
Agreed.
that, because that's a very important thing that I think Mr. Lackner and I would appreciate.
Okay, so I also did hear that through the maybe the National Equity Project, there was a proposal about how to do this work that could be presented to us as well.
Yeah, we started with them and asked for their support, and at the time, they were working in too many districts and were not able to help us. But what I'd like to do, and what I think I heard the request was, is that maybe we bring back several organizations that can do an audit and have you look at the different opportunities and make a decision.
I would, if we're going to do this in June. So I'm anticipating we will get a lot of information from our community on all sides. I'd like us to be really well-informed in June. I would like, because I will disagree with Mr. McNally about how an audit should go. I do not believe it should be done in-house. I think it needs to be an outside organization. I would agree with you a lot about PLC work and what we need to do there, but I don't think that's where it starts. So I don't want just a vote on deep equity, yay or nay. I want a conversation about where this board wants to take this organization for all kids. Because if we vote down deep equity, we will have cheers on one side and we will have boos on the other. We're a very divided country right now. And I think if we really believe that we're about all kids, then this board can find a way to make sure we are about all kids, and the whole community will cheer. So I'm hoping that it isn't just a vote because you didn't like deep equity, yay, we're done, but it's about what are we doing for kids?
And what's the solution?
And I don't know that there's one solution. I think there are multiple things. And I think if we're going to be great at this job for kids, then we're going to work together, problem solve, rather than find all the reasons we should fight each other. And if we don't, then we failed. So if we're going to do the vote in June, could we please have a good discussion about what we believe we want where we're headed? What's our vision? How do we get there? And let's come together as a community instead of pointing fingers, because it's not good for our kids. So
I
I
would
would
agree. I remember when we had this,
ask for
we
that.
started this discussion 6 months ago. I asked this board to come to the table ready to talk about equity. Do you remember that? And I don't feel like we have really done that yet. We have been talking about this voice or that voice. I would disagree that the majority of the community is represented by don't have deep equity. There are so many voices out there for deep equity as a program, the necessity of equity in general. I think we do have to listen to all the voices, but we have to figure out a way to break through the line of fear, which is what I talked about last time. Because if we're not talking about it and talking about the feeling portion of it, we're not going to be able to get to how do we fix it. And I know we want to talk about academics, but that's not how you get through the barrier.
I would agree with Mrs. McCabe that I suppose internal reflection is important and key, but I don't think that that's the most effective way if our students, who are our number one customer, for lack of a better terminology, I mean, that's why we're here, is the kids. And if our kids are saying, we need support, we have to listen. Where I will also say is that I don't feel that politics has a place in our classroom. I can't speak to what deep equity is, whether it's political or not. I would wholeheartedly disagree if there's politics in the classroom. It's one thing for it to be appropriate in a political science classroom. But I would have to look into deep equity for that. We're here for students and to teach them, support them in their journey to becoming adults. And I would not want there to be a political slant one way or another. I think we need to present all options, and that, speaks to equity in all kinds of ways. We can't just provide one viewpoint over another. We need to provide the whole viewpoint. So I will be looking forward to reading about deep equity for sure.
You have a lot of homework to do. Okay. All right. So what we are going to be putting on the June agenda, from what I'm hearing, is that we're going to have that proposal around the work. We're going to have some different samples of who can provide an audit. And then are we still wanting the termination of contract on for action?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, Dr. Pearson, can you bring what it would mean to interrupt that contract for the work that is going on
I think we can say
and the
that,
consequences of that?
Yes.
Because there is still work going on and how that impacts our administrative and train the trainer programs, which are in progress, will be in progress.
One other
Please.
thing one other thing I would ask for data-wise from you, Dr. Pearson, would be what the financial outlay of costs have already been versus what the termination of the contract would do, just so I can see numbers wise, or we all can see. But thank you so much.
So just to clarify, the 119,000 that was quoted earlier, is that not what we've outlaid today?
No, it's broken down because it's really, it's broken down by day. There's a cost for each day of training that's provided. And then, of course, for materials. And so that's broken down by day. So we can break it out in chunks. The administrative professional learning, the teacher building professional learning, depending on when it takes place. And then there's also termination language in the contract. So we can have the attorneys look at that and get an opinion for you on what that means.
So what is the 119,000 then?
It's the total cost of the contract that you approved that has all of the professional learning days and the student days. It's everything. It's all
Okay.
the days.
Thank you.
Mrs. McCabe, I'm fearful that your desire for the June discussion is laudable and unachievable. When I look back at the goal, which I'm looking at presently, it's from over almost a year ago. When I look at the discussion of the termination of a contract, that's certainly something we can discuss and take action on in the June meeting. The idea of moving from what we've seen so far and even evaluating deep equity again, quite achievable. But when I look at the distance of time that's progressed since this goal, I'm pointing at the goal here, was established to now, it sounds as if in the next 30 days, you'd like to see the comprehensive equity plan, which we have yet to see in any draft or have any committee discussions about. I see Mrs. Bell's copy of the facilities considerations sitting there. It's quite a large document. And I applaud the group for all of the great discussion associated with that process. I referenced earlier some of the discussions around deep equity and the series of meetings that took place. I just feel like it's an impossibility to look at a process like the facilities master plan process with a great amount of community interaction and engagement around an important and expensive idea and contrast it with the discussion we're having here and saying in 30 days, we'll have an answer to a very, very complex and thorny problem. And I just feel like that's impossible.
I'm not asking for an answer. Because I did say this is very complex. Deep equity is a program, it's a contract. In all honesty, that isn't just the answer. People can yell at us on any side. When we hear that there are kids who are saying, I don't feel like I belong, when we see the data that says our kids aren't achieving, then we need to decide as a board what we really mean when we keep throwing around the word equity. And we haven't had that discussion. We have had political discussions. We've been yelled at. We've been told that we are bad people. We've been told that we've made terrible mistakes. We're just as human as anybody else. So no, I know we're not going to have an answer in June, but I don't want to go through another school year not doing our best. And Mr. McNally and I don't agree on all points, but I do agree that we have to look at the academic piece and we've got to get to that question about how did I add to this student learning problem as a teacher and as an instructor. And that may mean I have to look within myself on the biases I have. So we have all of that. Deep equity is one little piece in the whole organization. So if we're going to vote it down and we're going to rescind that contract, then are we walking away? That's really my question. Or are we going to have a plan of some kind? And I don't often get called a Pollyanna, but I'm getting closer to the end of my time on earth, and I would really like to see one school district do its very best for all kids.
I feel that we have to do something for equity. Absolutely, no question. I have yet to look at all the deep equity materials, but what I can say to you, Mrs. McCabe, is that I'm here and I have fought some serious battles with this district for kids, and I will never allow us as a board. I will do my very best to support each and every student. And I know right now, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm willing to do what it takes to get there because I love these kids and they need us. And I'm not okay with kids feeling unsafe at school for any reason. And you have my commitment on that. I promise you, and I promise all of them and all their parents. That's why I'm here.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, so the discussion surrounding deep equity is closed then. At this time, that brings us to our end of meeting citizens' comments. Mrs. McCabe, would you please read our policy?
The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 15 minutes at the end of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Okay, our first citizen is MJ Gordon.
Hi, I'm MJ Gordon. Grandpa in this community. I've got two little kids in Anderson Elementary, and I think the little principal there. I've watched you just a few times go over the equity conversation. Say I'm astounded, it's not the correct word. Just to say, I see that the work hasn't been done, that this group hasn't inculcated what equity is to them. Each one of you, it's not possible. You can't tell me what equity is in 10 seconds, nor can it be understood in 20. It's not possible. I understand your heart. I hear your heart. I hear your heart, Pollyanna. Okay. All right. I'm a former teacher. I taught 5 years. First year I was a teacher. Kids were kicked out of junior high in the morning. Had no place to go. They were on the streets. Cops were after. They said, let's create a school called Parallel School. They couldn't find a regular art teacher. That was my finishing up at Drake. So we had about 50 kids. I got schooled on the culture that I didn't. I got schooled. And it's been a lifelong schooling that's lasted. When I pull out the academics, my piece was on academics, right, Carol? When I see the slide of academics from 2018, what's the number of SAT scores? You know that number? Mr. McNally? Yeah, you were doing 1128 in 2018. You know where it's at now in 2020? Good number to know. 1038. You can have all the discussion about, I want people to feel safe, I want people to excel. You have presided as board members, those of you that have been board members, have presided over the steady decline of the SAT scores. That's not the only score in the world. My son's an electrician, I get that. I get the trade. You want to make real money? Get in the trade. As a teacher, why did I get out? Because I was going to sign a contract for 11.5 when my first baby was born. Well, I got to get real. That's why. So until you address academics, Ms. Barker, Mrs. Barker, in my opinion, you and the superintendent ought to have that as item 1 on every agenda leading off. I know how you constructed it, same every time. It's like a mimeograph machine that comes out the same way every time. Academics on as line item 1, how are we doing? There's 2 questions in education. One is, did kids learn? You call yourself educated. Did my kids learn in my classroom? And then I say yes. How do we know? That's the second question. Right now, you know the score. Now you know the bottom score. My question is, in 2 more years, are we going to be sliding to 940? Then our hair will be on fire. We'll all claim we just got religion, and we'll try to turn around the academics. Equity, it's going to come, it's going to go, whatever, however it gets worked into the system. But if it doesn't drive academics up, what's the point? Thanks.
Okay, Okay, our next and final speaker is Shannon Sullivan.
Planning to speak tonight. But as I was listening to your discussion, I felt like I needed to. But I do want to say, I appreciate the conversation that you folks had tonight. Because of all the meetings that I've been to, you are finally engaging and like talking about things here, which I wish would have happened a long, long time ago. But here we are. Mrs. Barker, you talk about the data that you guys justified the deep equity in June. Can we share that with the community? I mean, this is, and I don't need an answer. This is what I'm saying. Evil lives in the dark. Parents feel like bad things are happening because you're not forthcoming. Not rocket science. I believe every person in this room wants the best for our kids. We should not be fighting. We're all on the same team. I appreciated the conversation tonight. I appreciate Mr. Lackner talking about parents. You guys talking about everybody but parents. This is such a hot, volatile subject. Yet parents are on the outside. Can't see the proprietary information. Put it up on the front. Have people leave their cell phone. Let parents see. What this program means. It means something different to each of you. I've listened to each of you. So, yeah, that's fair. You can justify it any way you want. Members should not feel bullied because we don't. Right now, but I share data that you have. This decision, share it, you can see it. Structure around this program. Know what we're doing. Academics, equity, again. I think we're all here for the right reasons. I'd like to see a little more structure, and I just applaud that you finally are having some real conversation tonight.
Thank you. Okay, there is no closed session this evening, so may I have a motion to adjourn regular board meeting today?
Second.
All right, Mrs. Bible and Mrs. Bow. Okay, so that would bring us to, our meeting is now adjourned at 9:19. Oh, that's right, sorry. Roll call, please, Mrs.
Okay.
Marson.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Miss Weibel,
Yes.
and Mrs. Barker.
Yes.
And then it's what time is it?
Okay, our meeting on May 10th at 9:19.